The wind screams through a forest of bones, its barren branches clawing at a sky choked with ash-gray clouds. A girl kneels by a frozen stream, her breath a fleeting wisp, curling like a ghost in the bitter air. Her fingers, raw and trembling, chip at the ice with a dull iron knife. Each strike a prayer for water, for life. This is Elfwin, 16 winters old, a weaver's daughter in a Mercian village where hunger is a shadow that never sleeps. The year is 842, and famine has sunk its teeth deep, gnawing at the land until it bleeds only dust. Her cloak, tattered and heavy with the scent of damp wool and sour barley broth, clings to her frame, its hem crusted with the mud of fields that have forgotten how to yield. In her village, a huddle of sunken thatch roofs and wattle walls, survival hums like a low dirge. Men carve spears from ash wood, their hands calloused not just from tools but from the weight of fear, fear of wolves, of raiders, of the cold that steals breath from the weak. Women murmur prayers to saints whose names blur in the haze of hunger, their voices weaving with the clink of bone needles and the crackle of a hearth too meager to warm bones. Elfwin's mother, once a singer of tales whose voice could hush a hall, now coughs blood into a rag, her body a frail husk ravaged by the wasting sickness that creeps like frost through the settlement. Each cough is a blade in Elfwin's heart, a reminder of the mother who once wove stories as deftly as cloth, now unraveling in silence. The girl's duty is a heavy thread, binding her to the loom and to the Lord's hall a day's walk away. She must carry her family's woven cloth, coarse wool dyed with wood and mud, spun through nights of aching fingers, to barter for grain that might keep death at bay. As she wraps the cloth in linen, her hands tremble, not from cold but from the weight of what she carries. Hope, frail as a sparrow's wing. Outside, a raven perches on the gnarled oak, its cry slicing through the silence like a shard of iron. Elfwin freezes, her heart tightening in her chest. The bird is an omen, its black eyes a mirror of sacrifice. To the village, it speaks of Woden's gaze, of fates spun and cut. To her, it whispers of the forest she must cross, a cathedral of shadows where wolves and worse wait. She steps into the frost, the bundle pressed against her chest, its weight both shield and burden. The village fades behind her, its smoke curling like a dying breath into the sky. The path ahead is a ribbon of frozen earth, winding through trees that stand like sentinels, their branches creaking under the wind's relentless hymn. Her boots crunch against the frost, each step a pulse in the stillness, and the air tastes of pine and decay. Elfwin's breath catches as she passes a broken shrine, its wooden cross tilted in the earth, draped with hoarfrost like a forgotten veil. She whispers a charm her mother taught her, words older than the church, older than the hunger that gnaws her belly. By root and stone, by blood and bone, guide my feet where shadows roam. The forest thickens, its canopy swallowing the weak light of a sun too tired to climb. Her fingers tighten around the bundle, the cloth within a tapestry of her family's labor. Her mother's songs, her father's calloused hands, her own sleepless nights at the loom. She thinks of the Lord's hall, its timber walls and roaring hearth, where men in mail drink mead from horns and women in fine kirtles whisper of raids from the sea. Will they see her, a girl with mud-stained hems and hunger-hollowed eyes, or will she be invisible, a shadow bartering for scraps? The thought is a stone in her chest, heavy as the raven's cry that still echoes in her mind. A twig snaps, sharp as a blade. Elfwin halts, her pulse a drum against her ribs. The forest holds its breath, and for a moment, she is alone with the silence. A silence that hums with unseen eyes. A wolf's howl, distant but piercing, threads through the trees, and she clutches the knife at her belt, its blade dulled but heavy with purpose. She remembers her father's words. The forest takes what it wants, but it honors the brave. Brave. The word feels foreign, a garment too large for her trembling frame. Yet she moves forward, the path narrowing, the air growing colder, as if the forest itself exhales winter. Hours pass, marked only by the ache in her legs and the frost that clings to her lashes. The Lord's hall is near now, its smoke a faint smudge against the horizon. But the forest does not yield easily. A rustle, too deliberate, too close, stirs the underbrush. Elfwind's breath catches, her eyes scanning the shadows. A figure emerges, cloaked in furs, his face half hidden by a hood. His hand rests on the hilt of a seek's, its blade glinting like a promise of blood. "What's a girl doing in these woods?" he rasps, his voice rough as gravel. Elfwind's heart lurches, but her voice, when it comes, is steady, woven with the strength of her mother's songs. "I carry clothes for the Lord's hall. Let me pass, and no curse will follow you." The man laughs, a sound like breaking ice, but he steps aside, his eyes never leaving her. Elfwind moves past, her steps quickening, the bundle a heartbeat against her chest. The forest watches, its shadows lengthening as dusk creeps in, painting the world in hues of iron and ash. She reaches a clearing, the hall's palisade looming like a giant's ribcage, its gates guarded by men with spears and eyes like flint. She pauses, her breath a cloud in the fading light, and looks back at the forest. The raven is there, perched on a low branch, its feathers a slash of night against the snow. It does not cry, but its gaze is a weight, a question. What will she sacrifice to survive? As she steps toward the gate, the wind carries the faint toll of a bell from the village behind her, a sound both mournful and defiant. It speaks of her mother, of the loom's rhythm of a world clinging to life. Elfwind tightens her grip on the cloth, its threads a map of her duty, her fear, her hope. The hall awaits, but so does the night and the path back through the shadows. What lies beyond the gates, grain, mercy, or betrayal, will shape not just her fate, but the fragile thread of her village's survival. And somewhere, in the silence between the bell's echoes, another story waits to unfold, one of fire and faith, where the cost of living is measured in blood and bone. A scream tears through the dawn, sharp as a blade, echoing across the cliffs where sea and stone collide. The sound lingers, swallowed by the toll of a cracked bronze bell, its voice defiant yet frail, calling monks to prayer in a crumbling stone monastery. Brother Alric, a scribe with ink-stained fingers, pauses, his quill hovering over a vellum page where psalms bleed into silence. The year is 793, and the Northumbrian coast trembles under the shadow of longships, their dragon-headed prows slicing through the mist like specters. The air is heavy with salt and the acrid ghost of charred wood, a scar left by the Viking raid that turned the village below into a pyre of ash and bone. Alric's chest tightens, the iron cross around his neck a cold weight, as if it could anchor him against the chaos creeping closer. Within the monastery's walls, thick with moss and the weight of centuries, a dwindling brotherhood clings to the rhythm of survival. Latin chants rise like smoke, curling through the chill of arched cloisters, their words a fragile shield against the unknown. Wooden bowls clatter at dawn, filled with watery pottage of barley and leeks, the only warmth in a world grown cold. Alric, once a fisherman's son, was given to the church to escape the gnawing hunger of coastal winters, but now he wonders if the divine has turned its face away. The abbot's voice, steady as stone, speaks of faith, of God's will in the face of fire and sword, but Alric's hands tremble as he traces gilded vines in the margins of a sacred text. Each stroke is a prayer, yet each scream from the shore beyond the walls is a question. What does faith mean when the world burns? The monastery is a fortress of memory, its flagstones worn smooth by the rustle of woolen robes, its air thick with the scent of tallow and damp earth. The brothers move like shadows, their lives bound by the hours of prayer, matins, lauds, vespers, each toll of the bell a tether to order. But order frays. Whispers of survivors drift through the gates, widows with frostbitten hands, orphans clutching rags that once were cloaks, their eyes hollow with loss. They beg for sanctuary, their voices mingling with the howl of coastal winds that carry the salt of the sea and the iron tang of blood. Alric hears them in the silence between his quill's scratches, their pleas weaving into the psalms he copies. He wonders if the parchment, its edges curling like autumn leaves, holds answers or merely the weight of his own doubt. He remembers the village before the raid, its thatch roofs silvered by moonlight, the laughter of children chasing crabs along the shore. His father's hands, rough from nets and brine, once lifted him to see the stars, naming them as if they were kin. Now those hands are gone, burned or buried, and Alric's world is reduced to this cloister where faith battles fear. The abbot speaks of martyrdom, of saints who faced death with songs, but Alric's heart harbors a quieter rebellion. Is it sin, he whispers to the vellum, to long for life beyond these walls? The words vanish into the air, unanswered, as a gull circles above, its wings slicing through the mist. Its cry is a fleeting hymn of freedom, a call Alric cannot follow, bound as he is by vows and the weight of his cross. The monastery gate creaks, a low groan that cuts through the morning's prayer. Alric's quill falters, ink pooling like blood on the page. A boy stumbles through, no older than 12, his tunic torn, his face streaked with soot and crimson. His eyes, wide with terror, carry a truth that shatters the cloister's fragile peace. The longships have returned. They come, the boy gasps, his voice a thread unraveling, with fire and axes. The brothers freeze, their chants falling silent, the bells echo fading into the wind. Alric's heart pounds, a drum against the stone of his chest. The abbot rises, his staff tapping the flagstones, but his words of courage feel hollow against the boy's trembling truth. The sacred text lies open, its gilded vines glinting in the candlelight, but Alric's hands no longer move. The world beyond the walls is not a rumor now, it is here, its breath hot with flame. He steps toward the gate, the iron cross swinging against his chest, its weight a reminder of vows he may not keep. The air grows colder, the scent of salt sharper, as if the sea itself presses against the monastery's stones. Outside, the cliffs loom, their edges jagged against a sky bruised with clouds. Alric's fingers graze the gate's rough wood, splintered and heavy, a barrier between salvation and ruin. He thinks of the village, its smoldering remains a tapestry of loss, and of the survivors who may yet live if the monastery opens its doors. But to open them is to invite death inside, axes, fire, the screams of the faithful. God sees all, the abbot once said, but what does God see in a heart torn between duty and dread? The gull cries again, its wings a fleeting shadow against the mist. Alric pauses, his breath a cloud in the dawn's chill, and looks to the horizon where the sea churns, its waves a chant of their own. The boy's words echo in his mind, a warning and a summons. The monastery, with its psalms and parchment, is a fragile ark in a world drowning in fire. What lies beyond the gate, mercy or massacre, will test not just his faith, but the courage to step into the dark. As the bell tolls once more, its note trembling like a final breath, Alric's gaze lingers on the gull, now a speck against the storm. Another story waits beyond these walls, one of blood and bravery, where the cost of survival is written not in ink, but in the choices of those who dare to face the dawn. A torch sputters in a cavernous hall, its flame clawing at the dark, casting shadows that writhe across tapestries of faded heroes. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of roasted mutton and the sharp bite of mead spilled from a thane's horn onto the rush-strewn floor. In a Wessex stronghold, the year 871, Edith, a healer's widow, moves like a wraith among the wounded, her hands stained with the bitter green of yarrow and the iron tang of blood. Her linen veil, frayed as her hope, brushes a warrior's fevered brow as she binds his gashed arm with strips of boiled cloth. Outside, the night roars with the clash of iron and the screams of men, a Danish warband pressing ever closer to the palisade, their axes glinting like wolves' teeth under a moonless sky. Editha's world is woven from the threads of survival, each day a litany of labor, grinding barley with a cornstone until her palms blister, boiling herbs in a cauldron that hisses over a smoky fire, whispering Anglo-Saxon charms to banish spirits that linger in the groans of the dying. The hall, its timber beams blackened by years of hearth fires, is both sanctuary and cage. Its walls, thick with the scent of oak and ash, hold the warmth of life but also the weight of death. She is no noblewoman, her kirtle patched and her fingers rough, yet her skill with salves and stitches carves a fragile place among the Lord's retinue. The warriors, their faces carved with exhaustion, speak in hushed tones of King Alfred's defiance, his banners raised against the Danes. But Edith sees only the cost, boys barely bearded, their blood seeping into the earth, their eyes wide with a fear they cannot name. She kneels beside a young warrior, his breath shallow, his chest rising and falling like a broken bellows. His fingers clutch a bronze amulet shaped like a boar, its worn edges a plea for strength, for life. The gesture pierces her, stirring the ghost of her own grief, a husband lost to fever, his laughter silenced in a single night, a daughter taken by the cold, her tiny hands still in Editha's memory. Hold fast, she whispers, her voice a thread of warmth against the chill, but the boy's eyes are already dimming, his soul slipping through her fingers like water. The hall hums with the low moans of the wounded, the clatter of mail as men prepare for another assault, the crackle of the hearth where flames devour the last of the oak. Editha's hands move, steady despite the ache in her heart, binding wounds, mixing poultices as if her craft could stitch the world itself back together. The great door groans, a deep bellow that cuts through the hall's fevered pulse. A gust of rain sweeps in, cold and sharp, carrying the silhouette of a scout, his cloak dripping with the storm's fury. His face is a mask of mud and dread, his voice hoarse as he speaks to the Thane, there at the palisade. Torches in the dark. Hundreds. The hall falls silent, the air taut as a bowstring. Edith rises, her heart a knot of resolve and fear, her veil clinging damply to her neck. She knows the night will demand more than her herbs can heal, more than salves can mend, more than charms can ward. The Danes are not just men, they are a tide, relentless, their war cries a chant that drowns the prayers murmured by the women huddled near the hearth. Thane's voice rumbles, calling for spears, for courage, but Edith hears the tremor beneath his words, the same tremor that shakes her own hands. She moves to the fire, stirring the cauldron where comfrey and nettle simmer, their scent a faint promise of healing. But her eyes drift to the tapestries, their threads unraveling like the lives around her. A woven warrior, his spear raised, seems to watch her, his eyes faded but unyielding. She thinks of her husband, his hands once strong enough to lift her in a dance, now gone. She thinks of her daughter, who once chased sparrows in the fields, now a shadow in her dreams. The boar amulet, still warm from the boy's grasp, lies heavy in her palm. It is a symbol of strength, yes, but also of sacrifice, of the blood that must be spilled to hold this fragile ground. "What more must I give?" she murmurs, her voice lost in the fire's hiss, her fingers tightening around the amulet until it bites her skin. Outside, the palisade groans under the weight of axes, the rhythm of destruction echoing through the night. The warriors ready their shields, their faces grim, their breath clouding in the cold. Edith moves among them, offering water from a wooden ladle, her touch a fleeting comfort. A young man, his cheek scarred, grips her wrist. "Will we live, healer?" His voice is a boy's, trembling beneath the weight of mail. She meets his gaze, her own eyes steady, though her heart fractures. "Live for the dawn," she says, the words a charm, a lie, a hope. He nods, clutching his spear, and steps into the dark. The hall feels emptier, the torchlight weaker, as if the night itself leeches life from within. The storm grows louder, rain hammering the roof like a war drum. Edith stands at the threshold, the door half open, the wind tugging at her veil. Beyond the palisade, torches flicker like fallen stars, their light swallowed by the shadows of the advancing Danes. The air smells of wet earth and iron, fear and challenge. She thinks of the fields beyond, where barley once grew, now trampled under boots and hooves. She thinks of the charms her mother taught her, words to bind wounds and banish spirits, but no charm can bind a heart broken by loss, no words can banish the tide of war. The boar amulet burns in her hand, a reminder of what it means to survive, fight, bleed, endure. As the first shouts of battle pierce the night, Edith steps back, her fingers tracing the rough wood of the doorframe. The hall behind her is a world of flickering light and fading hope, its walls a testament to those who have fought and fallen. Thane's voice rises, rallying the men, but it is the silence between his words that lingers, a silence that speaks of the cost yet to come. Edith's gaze lifts to the tapestry where the woven warrior stands eternal, his spear pointed toward a horizon she cannot see. The night is not over, and neither is the fight. Beyond the palisade, another story waits to unfold, one of fire and faith, where the price of survival is carved not in cloth, but in the courage of those who face the dawn with trembling hands and unyielding hearts. Mist clings to the fens like a shroud, a gray veil draped over reeds that whisper secrets in the dawn's chill. A punt glides through water thick with silt, its oars dipping with a soft, mournful rhythm. Cenric, a fun-dweller of East Anglia, grips the pole, his knuckles white beneath the grime, his breath a faint cloud in the air. The year is 869, and the great heathen army has scoured the land, leaving villages as heaps of ash and bone, their embers still smoldering in the distance. The air carries the scent of damp earth and decay, a faint sweetness of rotting rushes entwined with the bitter smoke of a far-off pyre. Cenric's tunic, patched and stiff with mud, clings to his frame, hollowed by weeks of hunger. Its course weave a map of his endurance. His world is one of hidden paths, where the fens are both cradle and cage. Eel traps, woven from willow with hands that tremble from cold, snag meager catches. Slippery, fleeting promises of survival. The croak of frogs weaves through the mist, a lullaby that doubles as a warning, their voices rising and falling like the pulse of the marsh itself. Cenric's family, once keepers of a small holding where rye grew tall, now huddle in a reed-thatched shelter, its walls sagging under the weight of rain and despair. His sister, Elgiva, barely 12, braids nettle cords to mend nets, her fingers bleeding, each dropping a silent offering to a life that demands everything. The Danes, with their iron and fire, have claimed the land, their demands for tribute, grain, silver, lives, falling heaviest on the fun-dwellers, invisible to lords who sit safe in their halls. Cenric's only weapon is cunning, his knowledge of the marsh's twisting paths and sunken pools a fragile shield against the raiders who hunt by torchlight. He steers the punt toward a sunken islet, its edges blurred by mist, the water lapping like a whispered prayer. The pole in his hands is smooth from years of use, its wood worn by his father's grip, now gone, taken by a Danish blade in a village that no longer stands. Senric's eyes, sharp despite the hunger that clouds them, scan the reeds for shadows that move too deliberately. The fens are his blood, their secrets etched into his bones. Where the silt deepens, where the herons nest, where the water hides paths only the desperate dare tread. But desperation is a heavy cloak, and it weighs on him now, as he thinks of Elgiva's gaunt face, her hands trembling as she weaves cords in the dark. "We'll eat tomorrow," he had promised her, his voice steady, though his heart faltered. The words felt like a lie, but lies are kindling when hope is scarce. The air grows colder, the mist thicker, as if the fens themselves conspire to hide him. A heron lifts into the sky, its wings cutting through the gloom, a fleeting prayer against the gray. Senric pauses, the pole still in the water, his breath catching as the bird's flight stirs a memory. His father's voice, rough as the marsh itself, once spun tales of freedom beyond the water's edge, lands where the soil gave freely, where no warlord's shadow fell. Those stories feel distant now, like stars veiled by clouds, but the heron's grace is a spark, a reminder of what might still be. Senric's fingers tighten on the pole, the wood a tether to the man he hopes to become, one who can carry his sister to safety, to a world where hunger does not gnaw at every dawn. A low horn sounds, its echo rippling across the fens, a signal from the Danes' camp hidden in the mist. The sound is a blade, slicing through the silence, and Senric's heart lurches. He knows that horn. Its note haunted the night his village burned, when screams drowned out the frogs and the sky glowed red. The Danes are close, their boots sinking into the marsh, their torches flickering like eyes in the dark. He crouches low in the punt, the water lapping at its sides, each ripple a warning. The islet is near, a place to hide the meager haul of eels he's caught, but hiding is no longer enough. The fens, for all their secrets, cannot shield his family forever. Elgiva's bleeding fingers, his mother's cough, the empty nets. They are chains binding him to a choice, to cower in the marsh's embrace or to rise, like the heron, toward a horizon stained with blood. He guides the punt to the islet, its muddy edge barely rising above the water. The reeds part, revealing a cache of woven baskets, their contents, eels and a few shriveled roots, a pitiful hoard. Senric's hands move quickly, covering them with rushes, his breath shallow as the horn sounds again, closer now. He thinks of the tales his father told, of men who defied kings, who carved paths through impossible odds. "The marsh hides the brave," his father had said, his eyes bright with a fire Senric now longs to feel. But bravery is a heavy word, and Senric is no warrior, only a boy with a pole and a heart full of fear. Yet the heron's flight lingers in his mind, its wings a silent call to something greater than survival. The mist shifts and a shadow moves, a figure cloaked in furs standing on the far bank. Senric freezes, his hand on the knife at his belt, its blade notched but sharp enough. The figure raises a hand, not in threat but in signal, and Senric's breath catches. "Finman," a voice calls, low and rough, "we know you're there." The words are Danish, accented but clear, and they carry the weight of a hunter who has found his prey. Senric's mind races, run, hide, fight, but the fens offer no easy answers. The water, the reeds, the mist, they are his allies, but they are fickle, as likely to betray as to protect. He thinks of Elgiva, waiting in the shelter, her fingers still weaving, her hope tied to his return. "I'll come back," he whispers, a vow to the marsh, to his sister, to himself. He pushes the punt back into the water, its glide silent, the mist swallowing him once more. The figure on the bank fades, but the horn's echo lingers, a promise of pursuit. Senric's heart is a drum, each beat a question. How long can he hide? The fens are vast, but the Danes are relentless, their hunger for tribute matched only by their hunger for conquest. He steers toward the shelter, toward Elgiva, toward the frail thread of family that holds him together. The heron is gone now, its wings lost to the sky, but its memory is a spark in his chest, a flicker of defiance against the dark. As the punt glides through the reeds, the mist parts, revealing the faint outline of the shelter, its thatch sagging like a weary heart. The croak of frogs rises again, a chorus of survival, and Senric's pole dips into the water, steady despite the fear that claws at him. The Fens are both cradle and cage, a world of secrets and sacrifices, and he is their son, bound to their rhythms. But the horn's echo follows him, a reminder that the world beyond the marsh is closing in. Another story waits, one of fire and flight, where the cost of freedom is measured not in eels or nets, but in the courage to face a dawn that burns with both hope and dread. A candle gutters in a stone chapel, its flame trembling like a heartbeat against the damp, unyielding air. The scent of beeswax weaves with mildew, curling through the darkness, a fragile thread in a world of shadow. Sister Godric, a novice in a Frankish convent, kneels on flagstones worn smooth by centuries of prayer, her hands chapped and raw from scrubbing linens in icy streams. The year is 814 and the Carolingian Empire mourns Charlemagne's death, its borders fraying like a tapestry under the weight of ambition and unrest. Godric's fingers clutch a rosary of bone beads, each click a plea for absolution, each beat a stone in the wall she has built around her heart. Her veil, heavy with frost, brushes the cold floor. Her breath rises in faint wisps, a ghost of the girl she once was. The convent is a fortress of limestone and faith, its walls thick with the echoes of rituals that bind the sisters to their purpose. Latin psalms rise in the pre-dawn chill, their cadence a rhythm as steady as the tides, yet as fragile as the candle's flame. The scrape of quills on psalters fills the scriptorium, where parchment drinks ink like blood, and the clatter of wooden trenchers at sparse meals, lentils and leeks boiled to a gray mush, marks the hours of hunger. Godric, born to a blacksmith's hearth, was sent here to escape a marriage she could not bear. Her father's hammer traded for the convent's silence. But silence is a heavy cloak, and beneath it, her heart whispers of a world beyond these walls. A world of meadows where she once ran, of laughter that tasted like spring. The sisters speak of martyrdom, their voices hushed with reverence, but Godric's rebellion is quieter, a longing for the life she left behind, its colors brighter than the convent's gray. The air carries whispers of war, sharp as the wind that rattles the chapel's broken shutters. Viking sails have been spotted on the Seine, their dragon prows slicing through the mist like blades through flesh. Villages burn, their ashes carried on the river's current, and the sisters' prayers grow fervent, their rosaries clicking like bones in the dark. Godric's hands tremble as she kneels, not from cold but from the weight of questions she dares not voice. "Is this God's will?" she murmurs, her words swallowed by the chapel's stillness. The abbess speaks of sacrifice, of saints who faced death with songs, but Godric wonders if God sees the ache in her chest, the pull of a world she was told to forsake. Her vows are chains, forged not of iron but of duty, and they bind her to a life of stone and prayer. She rises, her knees aching from the flagstones, and a sparrow darts through a broken window, its wings brushing the air with frantic grace. It perches on a wooden cross, its smallness a mirror to her own, a creature caught between freedom and captivity. The bird's eyes, bright as polished jet, meet hers, and for a moment the chapel feels alive, its walls pulsing with possibility. Godric's breath catches, her fingers grazing the rosary, its beads warm from her touch. The sparrow's sudden flight, a blur against the dawn, is a summons, a crack in the stone of her resolve. She steps toward the chapel door, her veil trailing like a shadow, and her hand finds the iron latch, its cold bite grounding her. Beyond the door lies a world of fire and faith where vows may falter, but her spirit, like the sparrow, seeks a sky unbound. The convent wakes slowly, its rhythm unbroken despite the whispers of war. Sisters move through the cloister, their robes rustling like dry leaves, their faces pale under linen coifs. The scent of damp wool and incense clings to the air, mingling with the faint tang of fear. Godric joins them, her steps measured, but her heart races, stirred by the sparrow's flight. She thinks of her father, his hands blackened from the forge, his voice rough but kind as he spoke of a world beyond their village. The river carries dreams, he had said, pointing to the Seine's silver thread. Now that the river carries death, its waters are stained with the ash of burned homes, and Godric wonders if dreams can survive such tides. In the refectory, the sisters eat in silence, their spoons scraping against trenchers, the lentils tasteless but necessary. The abbess, her face carved with lines of faith and fatigue, speaks of trust in God's plan, but her eyes betray a flicker of doubt. Godric's fingers trace the edge of her bowl, its wood worn smooth, a relic of countless hands before her. She thinks of the Seine, its currents whispering of places she will never see, of lives she might have lived. The sparrow's wings echo in her mind, a rhythm that drowns out the psalms. What is freedom? She whispers to herself, the words of sin she cannot confess. The convent's walls, thick as they are, cannot shield her from the truth. The world beyond is unraveling, and her vows may not be enough to hold her heart. A bell tolls, its note heavy with warning, and the sisters pause, their spoons still. A messenger has come, his boots caked with mud, his voice trembling as he speaks of raiders moving closer, their fires lighting the horizon. The abbess calls for prayer, but Godric's feet carry her back to the chapel where the candle still burns, its flame a frail defiance against the dark. She kneels again, but her eyes are on the window where the sparrow fled. The latch of the door gleams in the candlelight, its iron cold but inviting, a threshold between the life she knows and the one she fears. The Vikings are not just raiders, they are a storm, their axe is a hymn of chaos that threatens to drown the convent's chants. Godric's hand hovers over the latch, her heart a battlefield of duty and desire. The wind rises, rattling the shutters, carrying the faint cry of a distant horn. Godric's breath is a cloud in the chill, her fingers trembling as they touch the iron. She thinks of her father's forge, its fire, a warmth she may never feel again. She thinks of the Seine, its waters a path to both danger and dreams. The sparrow's flight was a sign, but of what, salvation or rebellion? The convent is her cage, but it is also her shield, its walls a promise of safety in a world of fire. Yet safety is a lie when the horizon burns and Godric's heart, like the candle's flame, flickers between faith and freedom. As she stands at the threshold, the bell tolls again, its sound a thread weaving through the dawn. The chapel is silent now, the sisters' prayers a distant hum, and Godric's hand rests on the latch, its cold a challenge she cannot ignore. Beyond the door lies a world where faith is tested by blood, where the Seine carries both ruin and hope. The sparrow is gone, but its wings linger in her soul, a call to something greater than stone. Another story waits, one of fire and flight, where the cost of living is measured not in prayers, but in the courage to step into a dawn that burns with both fear and possibility. Hooves churn the mud of a rutted road, the sound a dull heartbeat swallowed by the drizzle's hiss. The air bites with the scent of wet leather and pine, sharp and cold as a blade's edge. Wulfric, a boy of 10 winters, clings to the edge of a cart, splinters pricking his palms as its wheels groan under sacks of barley. The year, separator year, is 876, and Wessex trembles beneath the shadow of Danish blades, their iron hunger insatiable. Wulfric's world is this road, a ribbon of earth twisting through forests where wolves howl and outlaws lurk, their eyes glinting in the dark. His father, a ceorl bound to a thane's service, drives the cart, his face carved with worry, his hands tight on the reins. Wulfric's tunic, patched with scraps of wool, clings damply to his slight frame, and his fingers curl around a rusted knife, a gift from a brother whose laughter fell silent in a war beyond the hills. The cart rattles toward a fortified Ba, its timber walls rising like a promise against the bruised horizon. The journey is a tribute, a heavy load of grain to buy the Lord's protection, but the road is a thief, stealing strength with every step. They pass fields stripped bare, where peasants boil nettle soup over meager fires, their faces gaunt as they carve runes into doorposts to ward off spirits. Wulfric's mother, back in their village, weaves wool with fingers raw and bleeding, her songs silenced by the fear of hoofbeats in the night. The boy's task is simple but crushing. Guard the grain, the lifeblood of their kin, from thieves who would slit throats for a handful of barley. Yet his eyes, bright with the stubborn fire of youth, trace the flight of a kite circling above, its wings slicing the gray sky, a fleeting emblem of a world where no blades gleam. The forest presses close, its branches clawing at the clouds, their creak a whisper of warning. Wulfric's father mutters a prayer to Woden, though the priest in the village would curse such words, his voice sharp with judgment. The boy's heart thuds, the kite's cry echoing in his chest, a sound both wild and free. He grips the knife tighter, its rust flaking against his skin, and thinks of his brother Edric, whose laughter once lit the hearth, now lost to a Danish axe in a field too far to mourn. The memory is a stone in his throat, heavy with the weight of absence. Keep watch, lad, his father says, his voice rough as the road, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. Wulfric nods, though his gaze drifts upward, chasing the kite's arc, a dream of skies unmarred by smoke. The road dips toward a river ford, the water churning black and swollen with rain, its surface a mirror of the storm's wrath. A broken rope bridge sways in the wind, its frayed ends dangling like threads of fate, whispering of fragility. The cart halts, the horse snorting clouds of breath into the chill. Wulfric's father kneels for survival. The boy's eyes dart to the shadows, where the forest hums with unseen threats, outlaws, wolves, or worse, the Danes whose longships haunt the tales whispered by the hearth. The kite circles higher, its cry fainter now, and Wulfric's heart aches with a child's longing for wings, for a world beyond the mud and fear. The ford is treacherous, the water licking at the cart's wheels, cold as death's own hand. Wulfric's father lashes the horse forward, the cart lurching through the current, the barley sacks swaying like lives in the balance. The boy's hands tremble, not from cold but from the weight of duty, the knife at his belt a frail defense against the dark. He thinks of his mother, her fingers weaving through the night, her silence louder than any scream. The bar is close now, its walls a jagged line against the sky, but the road is a gauntlet, each step a test of courage. A rustle in the underbrush stops Wulfric's breath. A deer, perhaps, or something hungrier. His father's hand rests on his shoulder, heavy with unspoken trust. "We're almost there," he says, but his eyes betray the lie, scanning the trees for shadows that move too swiftly. The kite's cry fades, swallowed by the wind, and Wulfric's gaze lingers on the empty sky. The Buzz gates loom ahead, their iron hinges gleaming with the promise of safety. But promises are brittle in a land of war. The cart creaks onward, the mud sucking at the wheels, each turn a prayer for deliverance. Wulfric's fingers trace the knife's edge, its rust a reminder of Edric's blood, spilled too soon. The forest thins, revealing the Buzz palisade, its timbers scarred by battles past. The guards at the gate, their spears glinting, watch the cart approach, their faces hard as flint. Wulfric's father straightens, his voice steady as he names their purpose, but Wulfric feels the weight of their gaze, a judgment heavier than the grain. The gates creak open, admitting the cart into a world of smoke and iron. The Buzz alive with the clatter of forges, the shouts of men, the scent of burning oak and fear. Wulfric's eyes widen, taking in the sprawl of tents and the gleam of mail, the women stirring cauldrons of pottage, their hands red from work. The barley sacks are unloaded, counted, weighed, a transaction of survival, not trust. A thane in a wolfskin cloak eyes Wulfric, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Boy's got spirit," he says, his voice low, but Wulfric hears the challenge, the unspoken question, "Are you strong enough for this world?" His father's hand grips his shoulder, a silent response, but the kite's cry echoes in Wulfric's mind, a call to something greater than duty. As the cart is turned toward home, the sky darkens, the drizzle thickening to rain. Wulfric's father speaks of the grain's worth, of the winter they might survive, but his voice is a thread, fraying under the weight of what lies ahead. The boy's eyes search the sky, but the kite is gone, its wings a memory of freedom. The road back is the same, yet heavier now, the mud deeper, the forest darker. Wulfric's fingers curl around the knife, its rust a vow to return to protect what remains. The buffet's behind them, its walls a fleeting shield against the chaos beyond. The wind carries a distant howl, wolf or warrior, Wulfric cannot tell, and the road stretches on, a ribbon of hope and dread. The forest closes in, its shadows lengthening as the rain falls harder, each drop a cold reminder of the world's indifference. Wulfric's heart beats with the kite's cry, a spark of defiance against the dark. The cart creaks, his father's silence a weight heavier than the grain they've traded. The boy's eyes linger on the horizon, where the sky bleeds gray, and he wonders what lies beyond the road, safety or slaughter, duty or dreams. The knife in his hand is a promise, a tether to his brother's memory, to the family waiting in the village. Another story waits in the shadows, one of fire and faith, where the cost of survival is measured not in barley, but in the courage of a boy who dares to chase the kite's flight into a world aflame. The loom clacks in a low-ceilinged hut, its rhythm a heartbeat battling the storm's wail outside. The air is thick with the scent of lanolin and peat smoke curling from a fire that spits and sputters, too weak to warm the damp timbers. In a Northumbrian village, circa 850, Jitha, a spinner's widow, bends over the warp and weft, her fingers deft despite the ache of age etching her bones. Her gray hair, bound in a linen coif, catches the flicker of rushlight as she weaves a cloak for a lord's retainer, each thread a prayer against the cold. The year has been cruel, frost strangled the rye before it could ripen, and plague stole her son, his laughter silenced in a single fevered night. Now, only the loom's steady pulse keeps her tethered to a world that feels more shadow than substance. The village, a huddle of sagging thatch and weathered timber, clings to life by the law of survival. Men mend fishing nets with bone needles, their hands rough as the nets they knot, while women churn butter from sour milk, their faces drawn under the weight of hunger. Children scurry through the mud, gathering kindling under the watchful eyes of crows, their cause a chorus of judgment. Jitha's hands, lined with the years of a spinner's craft, know the weight of duty, a duty heavier than the wool she weaves. Her cloak, dyed with wood and stitched with care, is no mere garment. It is a fragile shield, bartered for the Lord's protection against a reeve whose demands grow sharper than any blade. The village whispers of rebellion, voices low as they speak of hoarding grain from the Lord's tithe, of defying the hand that feeds yet starves them. Jitha listens, her heart a frayed thread torn between loyalty to the land and the hunger that gnaws her bones. The storm howls louder, rattling the hut's walls, and the rushlight trembles, casting shadows that dance like ghosts across the loom. Jitha's fingers pause, her eyes lifting to the rafters where a spider weaves its web, a delicate trap glistening with frost. The sight is a mirror to her own life, each thread a choice, each knot a risk. She thinks of her son, Elric, whose hands once helped her spin, his smile brighter than the summer sun. The plague took him, leaving only silence and a wooden cross carved with his name, now buried under snow. "Why you?" she whispers, her voice lost in the storm's roar, her fingers tracing the shuttle's worn edge. The cloak is nearly finished, its folds heavy with the promise of warmth, but also with the weight of sacrifice. A sacrifice that may not be enough to shield her village from the reeve's greed. A bell tolls from the church, its note muffled by the snow piling against the walls. The sound is a tether binding Jitha to a faith she clings to yet questions, its promises as cold as the frost creeping through the cracks. The villagers gather at dusk, their breath clouding in the chill, their voices hushed as they speak of hiding grain in hollow trees, of defying the Lord who sits warm in his hall. Jitha's heart stirs, a spark of defiance kindling beneath her duty. She knows the cost of rebellion, outlawry, exile, or worse, the noose, but she knows, too, the cost of compliance, another winter of empty bowls, another child lost to the cold. Her hands move again, threading the shuttle, each passing a vow to the village, to Elric's memory, to the life she still fights to preserve. The fire crackles, a faint defiance against the storm, and the air grows heavier, thick with the scent of wool and fear. Jitha's coif slips, a strand of gray hair falling across her face, and she tucks it back with fingers that tremble not from age but from the weight of choice. The reeve will come at dawn, his boots crunching through the snow, his tally stick marking what the village owes. She imagines his eyes, cold as the iron he carries, and the cloaks she weaves, her life's work taken without thanks. The spider in the rafters spins on, its web a fragile masterpiece, and Jitha wonders if her own threads will hold or snap under the strain. "For you, Elric," she murmurs, her voice a thread of its own, weaving through the loom's rhythm, a promise to fight for those who remain. Footsteps crunch outside, heavy and deliberate, cutting through the storm's howl. Jitha's breath catches, her hands stilling on the shuttle. A knock, sharp as a hammer's strike, rattles the door, and a voice calls her name. Low, urgent, one of the villagers. "They know," he says through the wood, his words clipped with fear. The reeve's men saw the tracks. "They're coming." The words are a blade, slicing through the hut's fragile warmth. Jitha rises, the cloak falling across the loom like a shroud, its threads unfinished. She steps to the door, her fingers grazing the latch, its cold bite a reminder of the world beyond. A world of snow and suspicion, where loyalty is tested by hunger and defiance is paid in blood. The bell tolls again, its note a faint echo, and Jitha opens the door to the storm. The villager stands there, his face pale under a hood crusted with ice, his eyes wide with the truth. The grain they hid, the rebellion they whispered, is no longer secret. The crows in the distance call louder, their voices a warning or a judgment, and Jitha's heart pounds, a drum against the silence. She thinks of the spider's web, its delicate strength, and of the cloak, a tapestry of her sacrifice. The village is a thread stretched taut, ready to snap. Jitha stands at its heart, her hands still smelling of wool, her soul torn between the faith she was taught and the defiance she feels. As she steps into the snow, the storm swallows the rushlight's glow, leaving only the loom's shadow behind. The village waits, its thatch roofs buried under white, its people bound by a shared hunger, a shared fear. Jitha's coif is damp, her fingers numb, but her resolve is a spark kindled by the memory of her son and the whispers of rebellion. The Reeves men are coming, their torches flickering through the trees, their boots a drumbeat of judgment. Another story waits in the dawn, one of fire and defiance, where the cost of survival is woven not in wool, but in the courage of those who dare to stand against the storm.